This is TWiT.
I want to ask you something that you said earlier. You said arguably the most important AI is the neural network. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about what a neural network is and why you feel like that's one of the most important forms of artificial intelligence?
So you've got AI, as I was just saying, most of this is loosely defined. There's stuff that's clearly AI, stuff that isn't, stuff in the middle. So you have AI, then within that you have a branch called machine learning, and within machine learning there's a branch called deep learning. And deep learning certainly uses neural networks. It depends how you want to define it. So let's just say deep learning, because that's the interesting cases. Because in deep learning, the neural networks are really, really complex, tend to be. And that's where you get both really mind-blowing effects quite often, and also where you're more likely to run into the can't figure it out issue. So I point to neural nets for two reasons. First of all, that's where a lot of the most exciting, interesting, and mind-blowing work is being done. And if you just read a news report or something about a new AI that's doing something impossible, very likely it's a neural network. That's one reason. It's just sort of factually, that's where it's happening right now. The second is that, for me, that they are the epitome of the opposite way of approaching how to understand the world. So traditional programming, where you know what the factors are, what their relationships are, and you build the model and you give it to the computer, that is completely in line with thousands of years of Western thought of how we should proceed. Find the big factors and the rules that connect them. Neural networks are what you get when you, at least in some instances, when you don't follow that approach, when you instead say, you know what, let's just pour in data and let's let the model be as absolutely as complex as possible, millions and millions of pieces. It's with neural networks that you run directly often into the fact that it works, it does things better than and some things we never thought would be possible. But we can't figure it out. The computer scientists can't figure out how the thing is working, and the domain specialists, the doctors, can't figure out how it's making these diagnoses. There's controversy. I think many people who think that this is a solvable problem, at least to one extent or another. It's a huge amount of work in trying to make these systems intelligible to people. But at least for now, and as a non-expert, I think my bet would be that it's going to keep getting more and more complex and more inexplicable. At least for now, there are some systems that work. Got to throw up your hands. Don't know. Can't figure it out.
And we don't have to. We can let go and let chaos theory.
Often, but not always, because there are questions of bias.
Yes.
Okay.
There it is.
Yeah, it's really important.
I think we got that checked a couple times now. So no
it's
tweets.
Not just. Yeah, and it's not just protecting myself from tweets. It is a really serious problem.
Yeah.
I'm going to take one sentence, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Machine
learning learns from data. That data, if it has anything to do with humans and how we treat each other, almost inevitably reflects the most pernicious, awful biases in the culture. And unless steps are taken, machine learning will not only reproduce, but very likely amplify those biases. So it's a really serious problem.
Well, let's briefly touch on then. There was, I think it was Microsoft who came out with this machine learning bot. And I can't remember what her name was, but they called it a her. And for a while, you could communicate with it, and it would just normally respond back. And then a bunch of people fed it a lot of very racist things, and then the bot itself became racist because that was the data that was sort of plugged into it. But that is a more obvious and clearly defined sort of understanding of how that bias can take place. Tay, thank you. Tay was the name of the robot. But that is, a clear example. And kind of what you're talking about, I think, is a little bit more of the things that we don't necessarily see, because we are looking at these small pictures. But if you feed it a trillion data points and there is some inherent bias in those things, then that's where we have this issue of different types of bias playing a role in determining or not determining, correct?
Yes. So I'm not sure I'm thinking of the same example, but I think it was I'm not sure who, fed in tweets, and within an hour, the bot had become full-on racist. It was both funny and horrifying. In that case, you can spot the racism instantly, right? I mean, it's just being a racist. That was really easy to see what had happened. It was horrifying. In the case of some system that's being used for, figuring out what's the most effective bus schedules and routes in the city, or something evaluating loan applications, or really well-known and quite distressing examples in the judicial system of machine learning being used to assess bail and sentences.
Yes.
The racism may be far more hidden. And if you can't know how the system came up with its decisions, it may be very hard to discover the racism that is embedded in it. So lots of people are working on this, thankfully. But it is a very, very, it is machine learning's original sin in that it's connected right to the essence of machine learning. The essence of machine learning is it learns from data. And,
and I suppose
it'll end up racist unless you, go ahead.
Right. I was just going to say, and I suppose that's why we can count on things like weather patterns to sort of be a good example of how machine learning and we interact every day. I think even in the book it was described as sort of going from, I don't know, like a Minecraft 8-bit video game to being able to zoom in and see the sweat rolling down a character's face in terms of the complexity that was added when we threw in those deeper learning systems to predict weather. And with those, we're looking at weather patterns, and we don't necessarily have to worry about any of that bias getting in the way.
Oh, but you do.
Oh, but there's still some there?
Well, I don't know that there is, but you need to worry about it. I'm going to give you an example. I'm making it up. I don't know if it's real, but it's easy to imagine a case in which the data for developed nations is far richer than data for less developed nations. Fewer sensors, worse communications, all those sorts of just unfortunate facts of life. So it's plausible to worry that weather predictions are going to be more accurate in wealthier parts of the world. Now, that's not flat out racism, but it can have enormous effects on, weather forecasts are really important, as we know in hurricane seasons and the rest of it. So there is a type of inequality that and a type of unfairness that can arise even in something as global as weather.